Fuck you.
That's how you do it?
I made a video nearly identical in theme to this one about a year ago. Now, while I still stand by that first video almost entirely, I'll be the first to admit it was a sloppy job. It rambled on a lot more than it needed to, and it was just rushed in general. That being said, I still think it's accurate. And today, after a year of mindless drones going on about X, Y, and Z, I'm back to dip my toes into this realm again. This is going to be a very charged video, so if you're not into the politics game, stay away. This is more for me, just a nice solid rant. Welcome all you beautiful ladies and animals, as today, woke is cringe. It always kind of has been, and I think that goes across partisan lines. Whether you're a performative liberal who just likes to use AAVE to make yourself feel more progressive, or a skin-blistered incel who just needs verbal analogs to say the N-word without saying it out loud. Woke as a word has lost all meaning. I talked about this in the first video, but woke is literally just a part of the term stay woke, born from African American communities. In the most simple way, it's just a term to be used between members in the community, to be awake to social change. It's a term that has history all the way back to the 1930s, if not before. Today, woke means anything that isn't aligned to evangelical white Christian or conservative values. A black person existing, woke. Gay, woke. Women, woke. Vegan food, probably woke. It's an endless well that can be picked up and applied to everything seen as bad from the right side of the aisle. And that's not an issue of the word woke, because this happens to all progressive terms and ideas. Liberal more or less just means not conservative. DEI applies to anything that happens to be a tinge away from straight, white, or male, even when it doesn't make any goddamn sense.
How many people unnecessarily died because of DEI?
The root of this is just that progressive movements have an awful handle on marketing. They are absolutely awful at slogans and simple messaging. And when you have a voting population of millions of morons who don't look past the headlines, that simple messaging is what you need. And the fact that the left side of the aisle can't effectively communicate is where they fall every time. Look at the pro-choice movement. Yeah, makes sense. You're in favor for people to choose whether or not they want to have an abortion. But the left side of the aisle is also pro-life. We are for the societal systems that allow people who are disenfranchised and left behind in the margins of our capitalistic hellscape to be lifted up so they can live good lives and live in freedom and prosperity. On the conservative side, they're pro-life in the case of a fetus, but the moment they're born, it's over. A grown woman's corpse can be used as an incubator, and an endless number of young men can be thrown at a war in the Middle East on behalf of our genocidal allies, but we just let these guys claim pro-life as their label? The pro-life movement is just anti-abortion. They don't care about life. They laugh and take great joy in the idea of feeding Latino citizens to alligators. The progressive movement is the pro-life choice, but they just can't capitalize on the marketing you need to capture the docile voting base.
Pro-life conservatives are obsessed with the fetus from conception to 9 months. After that, they don't want to know about you.
Another massive blunder in this example is defund the police, which, nobody who you'd take seriously wants to actually abolish the idea of enforcement nationwide. The general idea is to reallocate funding, restructure and get police to work closer with social services and proper training. So we're not sending stormtroopers to deal with someone who is suffering from a mental illness. Because normally all that does is end the day with violence and unnecessary bloodshed. But progressives, almost as if they're trying to shoot themselves in the foot, shout, "Defund the police." Like it makes any sense. No, it doesn't sound like rebuild the police or restructure the police, but it sounds more like,
the next time you get in trouble, call a crackhead.
which allows these dumbass right-wing pundits to do what they're best at, taking these well-meaning ideals and weaponize it to make the progressive lens seem like some psychotic, irrational movement. That's how we've gotten to the point that when you have someone like Zoran Mandani talking about restructuring the police and injecting social services into the NYPD, the right-wing grifters can just spout, "He wants to defund the police," and millions will eat that shit up because you've set your own party up to fail. Add on top of that the failures of the Democratic Party, too afraid to piss off their corporate backers, and avoiding the blatant popular points that put the properly left-wing people like Bernie Sanders and Mamdani right where they are now, a reluctance to actually stand up for people against oppressive corporations for the sake of a paycheck, when it's been shown time and time again that these populist ideals are obviously very popular. They let the side who is entirely bought out by millionaires and billionaires, literally, tell stories about how there will be no tax on overtime. Sounds great, but we knew when it was announced it was gonna suck, and we've been shown now just how bad it will be, benefiting the corporate 1%ers more than any working class Americans. I would know, I'm part of those blue-collared 9-to-5s myself. To sit around and do nothing for people while spitting statistics is kind of good. Sure, you're technically correct, but being technically correct does nothing when your opposition can just lie and say whatever the fuck they want to make themselves look good.
The war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
At least try to promise the things you won't deliver on while you're performatively putting on a show for Pride or BLM. And while those issues will still exist within Democrat, leftist, and progressive circles, it doesn't take away from the blatant and wild racism of the right, who so clearly use terms like woke or DEI as a catch-all regressive to say they hate the minority groups without saying it directly. Dog whistles have evolved into bullhorns, but somehow a generation of internet-raised dumbasses have been convinced this isn't what it is. They will tell you the evidence of your eyes and ears is wrong, and they get away with it every time. The only solution to this issue is better messaging from the left side of the aisle. For a group that is so amazingly creative, they suck at conveying simple messages to get on the side of the majority. Made even harder when the establishment quote-unquote left-wing party refuses to play into populist rhetoric and relies on numbers and stats that are so goddamn hard to pierce through that if you're some geriatric geezer working the paper mills in Oklahoma, you're never gonna fucking understand it. Although calling the Democrat Party left is already stretching that definition way wider than it deserves. One of the strangest things we've all seen rise is just the raw number of people who gain popularity and take advantage of lacking critical thinking skills by just spouting bullshit and writing it off as fact. Every single right-wing grifter does this, whether it's a louder voice like Asmongold or the seething incels like Synthetic Man. Hey, he calls himself that. Get off my back. The ability to just say nothing, with no evidence, and somehow win over the hearts and minds of millions of losers online is almost commendable. My favorite example of this is Andy Pants Gaming, who, even hardcore fascists think this guy is a grifter. It was clear to me when we went over his video on Gears of War. To run it down for you really quick, I'm a huge fan of Gears. I talk about it all the time. There's a cardboard standee of Baird in my office right next to a Lancer, and I've made dozens of videos on the series, even though they always perform like trash, and I fully expect them to every time, because it's not really the most popular thing. So when I say that Andy's Gears of War is woke and bad now video was just him recapping the original games off Wikipedia and then making an entirely false statement about the new games, that's what it is. He can go on for just long enough to hit the monetization requirements on YouTube, then drops a line in about how the new games are all about sisterhood.
And it becomes a game about deserting the military, being a coward, sisterhood, about women, and starring women.
As compared to the earlier games' focuses on brotherhood. The old games were barely about brotherhood. They feature a dominantly male cast of stereotypes and 80s action stars, and maybe Dom cried once or twice, but it's not really a story about brotherhood. There's brotherhood in it, that's probably one of the themes, you just get the vibes of it from the fact that it's a co-op game. And then B, nothing about the sequels is even remotely about sisterhood. Not only do male characters outnumber female characters just as much as they did in the past games, but the female lead of Gears 5 doesn't have a single positive conversation with another female character. She only speaks with Jin and Mira, kind of. both of whom are antagonists in the story. The only other girl is Lizzie, and she dies almost immediately after she's introduced. This doesn't feel like a game about sisterhood to me. There is no world in which this criticism is valid or even applicable to the game. Not a single character, male or female, even has anything to do with their sexes in regards to the plot. It's more about family as a whole, which is what the old games were also about. But screaming, "woke girl boss ruined my masculine game," is an effective tactic when you're peddling to lonely men who don't know how to speak with women or view women as lesser in the social hierarchy. Whether it's some potato-starved kid who says that Ironheart is destroying the legacy of a comic book character seconds before admitting he's never watched the show.
No, these are the fans that read the original Marvel comics and don't want to see Tony Stark as a little black girl from the hood. I haven't watched Ironheart, and I really do not plan to.
Or another loser saying that interracial marriages are inherently destructive to society.
I mean, if you like this show on any level, I've lost any and all respect for you. In fact, I don't think I even view you as human anymore if you like this show. Yeah, I'll go that far.
This genre of bullshit grifters who have sniffed so much of their own farts that they begin to unironically believe the lies that they peddle. I don't know how anyone can engage with this and fall for it, just accepting everything that's told to you at face value without even slightly questioning its validity. And I'm not saying you can't criticize these games and shows. I made an hour-long video shitting on Gears 5, and there's plenty to shit on the MCU for, or the recasting of characters in a different race. But we can't have these discussions that require understanding and nuance if one side of the aisle is primed to say it's black and woke, which means it's bad. Which is just not an argument. There's a difference between good faith criticism of something, even if it's a disagreement from a political lens, and the reactionary jump to super woke because any project contains a word you don't like.
You know what it says on his cape? MS-13.
Wow.
Is it superimposed or it actually says that?
Now in the world of video games and comic book movies, who cares? It's just a bunch of chronically online geeks trying to shove a superiority complex down someone else's throat because their ego is entirely tied up defending a fandom war. But recently, we've seen exactly why this ask-no-questions mentality becomes so evil, so corrosive. In the last 2 weeks, there's been a lot of wild examples of this in play in the real world. Whether it's grifters and pundits saying, "Oh yeah, actually the Epstein thing is no big deal. Why do we care about that?" When they're told to do so, the rest of the party following right behind after screaming about government corruption for half a decade now and getting so worked up, they raided the fucking Capitol.
Point out, Democrats running the FBI and the DOJ would have had a pretty large incentive, would they not, to have dumped an Epstein file on, say, Donald J. Trump. Would they not?
Or, well, let me just show you.
We all grew up listening to the speeches that H-men gave to the German people and troops. Couldn't understand what they were saying, but boy, they sounded menacing. I mean, it just sounds evil. You know, well, now they've got AI that translated it into English. It talks about Christian values and moral integrity and how valuable women are to a society. Damn, it's not quite as bad as I thought it was. And then it talks about the media being so corrupt. It played a big part in the Germans having their culture stolen from them. Damn, these are things we worry about. And, you know, I can't help but think we might have been on the damn wrong side of history.
Yes, we've come to the point where once Hitler's speeches are accessible and understandable in English, the thought isn't, "Oh, this guy sounds a lot like Trump. Maybe I should reflect my support of this political candidate." But rather, maybe Hitler's not that bad. We live in an age where Holocaust denial and Nazi revisionism isn't contained in 4chan boards, but becoming the popular opinion of real people in the real world. Fascism. It's not a word I use lightly. It doesn't come with a bang. It doesn't flip on like a switch. It creeps in as a mindset, one that demands total trust. No questions, no hesitation. If you can't see that you're being pulled along into something, maybe it's time to step back and ask, what am I actually supporting? We're all aware that history repeats itself, but you can never assume you're immune to the mistakes of the past, especially when you're being taught to fight someone based on who they are, not what they've done.
And are we really going to have 2 Muslim mayors of the major financial power centers of the West? Like, let's just take a pause and take a step back and, like, what does that say and what does that mean?
This is why grifters to the left don't last long. It's a stereotype that leftists cannibalize themselves before they can build an effective coalition of ideologies. In some sense, that's very true. But all at the same time, it's a self-correcting system. People who come in and speak good on liberal ideologies but are weak in their methodology or are just putting on a show, the Destinies and Dean Witherses of the world, they're whittled out and made into examples of what not to be. There's definitely a lot of examples where the left demands too much moral purity or swings so hard they become rigid and unmoving of other ideas, which in turn makes them reactionary all the same, with things like Sabrina Carpenter's new album being blasted as putting feminism back, because that sense of purity has been pushed so far it wrapped right around to the conservative Puritan values, even if it's coming from a different origin point. Neither side is immortal to the all-consuming swaths of culture, identity, politics. But that's the difference. On the left, you can be wrong. You can get called out. On the right, just say the buzzwords. Ride the outrage wave, and you're golden. Doesn't matter how inauthentic or misleading you are. That's the grift, and that's why it works. Now, I'm well aware that anyone who sees the world in the black and white dichotomy of liberal and conservatism has already clicked off the video. They probably left a comment without getting any further than the title, and there's something extra corrosive in that. More than being close-minded, but actively disengaged from voice and nuance that challenges the strength of your tribe. If you're a part of the puritanical feminist movement I mentioned earlier with Carpenter, or a Fox News viewer who thinks that January 6th was a peaceful gathering, you've clicked off this video and rejected it as mindless propaganda without trying to engage with my rhetoric devoid of tribalistic guidelines. That line itself might have been too much. And in some sense, it makes total sense. It's human nature to be communal, to seek community. If you feel outcast from one, you're going to run into another. In the same vein of me calling out other young men as losers or incels, it's going to push some of them away. But if you're honest, not just with others, but with yourself, you should be honest enough to recognize that those criticisms are something you can grow past. There's nothing stopping you from breaking an intellectual-based derogatory label outside of change. A big difference I see between the right and the left is how they insult, with obvious exceptions on both sides. Normally, slurs from the left are based on ideology. Magat, incel, even me saying loser. These aren't intrinsic properties. It's an ascription of character based on what you believe in. Versus on the right, common and popular insults, even hurled by the most prominent members of the political party, are based on race and sex, whether it's misogynistic language or calling Mamdani a jihadist terrorist simply because he's Muslim, or going after somebody who's LGBT. They attack these face-first intrinsic features of people, mainly because they don't have the understanding of their ideological foes to challenge their viewpoints. Communist is not a put-down when you don't know what the term communism even means. In the inverse, the left tends to target these movements ideologically because we can see where the roots of fascism are planted. How they are asking people every day to dehumanize and see their countrymen as lesser, attacking these movements in a way that seeks to decouple people from their programming. Even if plenty on the left, like myself, fall into personal insults, normally it's in response to gross behavior like Synthetic Man saying that all black people are inherently evil, which in itself is reactionary rhetoric spun on people being angry at companies like Sweet Baby Inc., who had a lead go on a rant about not hiring white people, which itself was spurred on by a history of mistreatment and crimes against African Americans in all of US history. Point is, you can find a way to draw blame back for tens, if not hundreds of years, but that gets us nowhere. The more important thing is to have empathy and understanding. Yes, are there groups that are actively angry with white people in America? Of course. But when you look at our history, can you really blame them? These reactionary voices want to scream victimhood because the Little Mermaid was casted as black for brownie points, but totally downplay and ignore the hundreds of years of pain and suffering one group laid onto another. They're so programmed into this knee-jerk reaction that they won't even sit to try and understand the difference between black chattel slavery in America and the indentured servitude of Irishmen in the earlier stages of America. They just say, well, wasn't that the same, without even trying to instigate further because their mind is so closed off from it that they can't even comprehend a different viewpoint. Now, not all the white people in America are accountable for the pain and suffering, but we are responsible. It's our duty as Americans, and even further as people, to right the wrongs of the past. And letting yourself live in ignorance or ignore the issues only serves to divide you further, and before you know it, those tools of fascism work their roots into your mind, and just following orders becomes an excuse once again. Tribalism, or pulling yourself away from nuance, is the worst thing you can do to yourself. Your duty as an American is to hold your own party accountable, to apply logic and sound lines of reason to the way you think. To understand that the suits and corporations are the ones trying to make you fight with your countrymen over a 3% tax cut that goes away in 3 years, while they skim 13% off the top in a permanent withdrawal. America's history is made better by the arguments we've always had, from the members of the Constitutional Convention that stormed out because of their disagreements, to the brave Americans who marched for rights in the 20th century, and the soldiers who gunned down Nazis in Normandy. Oligarchical fascists are the monarchs and kings of the modern age. Without the ability to use gods and royalty to instill themselves in power, they take advantage of our free democracies in order to corrupt it from the inside out. We don't serve authority, we serve the people, and that's how it should be. If you're too caught up arguing about wokeness, you're being effectively held back from fulfilling your duty to the country and building the much-needed guillotine for fascism. But that'll be it for us today. As always, a wonderful thank you to all the glorious patrons and members who support the channel. If you'd like to be among them, you can join for just $1 a month and get videos early, get some behind the scenes, and even ask questions in the videos themselves. Thank you all again for watching, and I'll see you next week as we cool off and return to some Warhammer Doctor Who goofiness. Stay cool, have fun, and be awesome. Buster out.